what tends to happen is you make any argument sort of against their current philosophy or ideology regarding privacy, and you immediately get people sort of saying, so you're saying that you want them to become Google, you want them to become, that you want them to become the enemy, basically. You want them to just sort of give in, and it's like, no, that's not even close to what we're sort of arguing here. What we're sort of arguing here, it is nuanced. It's sort of a little bit abstract, I think, for people to understand. But I am making an argument with the privacy policy as implemented. I'm not making an argument against privacy at all. And I mean, there's a few things that you have to kind of tease out. It's like, well, if you're gonna call these companies bad actors, you really need to kind of get into what that means. Would it make sense? I mean, you talk about Google, and like, in what ways are they anti-privacy? It seems to me that their business model is actually kind of hinged on customer privacy. Now, can you imagine the scenario where tomorrow Google gets hacked and suddenly all users' data is exposed?
I just got chills thinking of that.
But it hasn't happened, right? Meaning that they are clearly very incentivized, it turns out, to keep your privacy. Now, where things actually get murky is what we're talking about in terms of the effect that an advertising model can have on information, on what you can or cannot say on the internet, what you can or cannot see on the internet. To me, that's sort of the much bigger concern as far as your personal privacy. I can't think of a company that's doing more to try to make sure that your information is not exposed than Google. I mean, this is where my sort of thinking about this sort of flipped around. Like, first of all, like, what is the actual problem with Google? I don't think this is clear necessarily to everyone. It's not quite that they're just exposing your data. That's just not quite accurate. It's more the effect that Google, a company that is their entire business model is ads. It's the effect that has, and the way that tentacles out into society, and how it affects other companies that come up. Because literally almost every new tech company is, get as many users as possible first, and then figure out a way to monetize later. And the way that they always figure out how to monetize it later is through ads. This is the deeper question to me. As far as privacy goes, I mean, obviously there's government concerns, but let me tell you something. The government's going to get your data. Any government, they're going to get it. Like, we had the situation where there was a standoff, right, with Apple and the FBI. And at the time, I was completely on Apple's side of that equation. But in the time since, it's turned out that Apple has actually worked with the FBI almost every single time they ask. It turns out that they're completely willing to hand over iCloud data. They're completely willing to help unlock a phone, so long as you don't run to the press. Now, isn't that scary? Isn't that actually a scarier thought? They're perfectly willing. And realistically, what can they do? What could they actually, what could they, if a government comes to them and asks, we need this information about XYZ person, unlock this phone, blah, blah, blah. They can't break the law. So one solution is Apple can just choose to not have any data, and they can head in this direction where they just try to have as little data on people as humanly possible. And that's kind of what differential privacy is about. It's like this move to try to obscure the data to such an extent that, Apple doesn't even have the key, even if they wanted to have it. They can't get the data themselves.
It's the corporate equivalent of like a kind of befuddled shrug. Well, I don't know. I don't have that. Checking your pockets. Ooh, is this it? No, that's another key.
And so there's a couple things to think about. If the government wants your data, they're gonna get it. And here's the other thing: if if Apple does obscure the information to that extent, and they're actually successful in doing that, well, what do you think the government response is going to be exactly? Do you think that they're just going to be like, well, that's all fine and dandy. I guess you guys don't have it. No big deal. Or are they going to force them to create a backdoor? There's just all these questions that come up, and you think about it, and inevitably, the law is going to win. The governments are going to win on this particular topic. So you have to kind of separate this out. It's like, if you're concerned about privacy, it's like you should really be lobbying your government. You should be really trying to make sure that they can't do things like that. And the other question is, like, do you want them to not be able to do things like that? Because there's a lot involved there. Right? Like, there's some legitimate, concerns. Like, there's instances where you do want them to be able to get access to this kind of stuff. So anyway, I'm just saying, like, that whole aspect of the privacy angle is kind of bullshit.